We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. Uh-oh, thrift diving.
Hey, what's up? It's Serena Pia from ThriftDiving.com, which is a do-it-yourself blog, YouTube channel, and podcast that helps you decorate, improve, and maintain your home with paint, power tools, and thrift stores without sacrificing your budget, the environment, or style. Welcome to episode 117 of the Thrift Diving Podcast. And today we are going to talk about building this deck. That's right. This is part one. You know, I've been building a deck on the front of my she shed. It's taken so long to get to this point. I'm talking a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And it's crazy because I remember getting to the point of ordering the shed and then when it was built and then doing all the refinishing on the interior. But the one thing that I never got to was the deck. You can call it a porch. It's really not very big. It's 4x8. And I actually need to do one on the side door as well, much smaller. Probably like a 3x3 or whatever. But this is the project that I have been dreading. I told you in the last episode that I've been dreading it because I really had a lot of fear about starting this project. And I kind of talked through some things that I'm doing, right? I'm setting this date by when I want to have it done, which actually was supposed to be last Friday. And guess what? I didn't get it done. I don't take full responsibility for that. There were some wildfires. If you've been listening to the news, we had wildfires, smoke from Canada that was blowing down through like New York. I mean, it was terrible in New York. We had some of that smoke in DC. I think even as far as North Carolina, they had some smoke. So that kind of took a couple of days off of my timeline. This weekend was a little tough because my son's like, "Mommy, can we go to the pool?" Okay, yes, we'll go to the pool. But that was on Sunday. So that pretty much took up almost my entire day. And then on Saturday, there was soccer and a birthday party. And so, you know, I really got in just a couple hours here and there. So it wasn't like I haven't been working on it, but the time that I've been working on it, it's been very, very slow. And I think this is probably the usual case, right? When you're working on a project that you've never done before, it's hard to zip through it because you're just not sure of each of the steps and you want to make sure that you're doing, you know, your due diligence so that every part turns out. Because, you know, like when you're building a deck, if you don't have it level, then when you go to do the next part and it's not level, then you're not going to really even be able to put the decking on the top boards. So, you know, each part seems like it's taking forever. But that's okay. I'm not really rushing it. I do need to get done before I leave for my international trip, which is coming up in 3 weeks, which is insane. I've got a lot of things I have to get done during that time. So this deck has to get done. So I thought maybe we would talk a little bit about what are some of the things that I have discovered along the way in working on this project. And they're small things. I mean, they're not big things. Some of these things I've talked about before, trying to meet your goals and, you know, working through your fears, but just a few lessons learned, things that I have come across as I'm putting this together. So I did tell you again, the fears. Let me go over the fears I had with this project. And you might have similar fears. You might be starting a new project you've never tackled before. And you might be having some of the same fears. Well, my first fear in doing a deck, and this is why it took me so long to do it, was because generally when you're putting on a deck, whether it's your house, a shed, and it depends on where you live, you have to dig down. The posts have to sit below the frost line, which means you have to find a way to dig. And I do have an auger. Ryobi makes a really cool auger if you are putting a fence in or if you're doing a deck. This auger, it's a huge thing. You probably need a really strong person. I'm going to say a really strong man because like my husband, whenever we've used it to plant flowers and plants and shrubs around the property, we've used this auger. Well, you can also use it for and I'll leave a link down below in the show notes if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But basically it's this big 2-handle auger that has this big drill that just drills down. And this thing is powerful. So I knew that we had a way to dig in order to put a foundational post into the ground, right? You need 4, well, not 4. You probably need more for a deck, but I knew that I was going to have to lay it out in such a way that I would have to go below the frost line. Here in Montgomery County, I believe, I want to say it's 30 inches. You've got to go down at least 30 inches. And for me, digging that far down and putting concrete in the hole and having this like permanent structure, it was intimidating, to be honest with you. It was very intimidating. And that is one thing that just deterred me from doing this project because, if you're putting these posts in the ground, right, you're usually, the way that I've known it to be done is you've got these concrete forms. They look like big pieces of tubular cardboard, and you dig down 30 inches or whatever your frost line is, insert it into the hole, fill it with pre-mixed, or, well, actually, I guess you'd have to pre-mix it, but sometimes you don't have to. But you would fill it up with concrete mix, and then I think there's a way to anchor it so that your post is sitting on the concrete. Some people used to do posts where they would actually insert the pressure-treated wood, like a 4x4, say, into concrete. You kind of don't want to do that because it can rot the wood over time. So now what you'll see in construction, from my understanding, is that you have the concrete post, but then you've got something to anchor the 4x4 post to the concrete. And I believe that's like the company that I know is called Simpson Strong Tie. And so you can buy a little bracket that sits on top of the concrete, and then your post will sit inside. So the idea is that you don't want the post sitting on the concrete where it could mix with water and just rot and deteriorate over time. You don't want that. But anyway, knowing that I was going to have to do all of this prep work, it was intimidating. And I didn't want to do it. I did not want to have to plan out, where do these concrete posts have to be? What if I do it in the wrong area? What if I think that I want the deck to be this size and I put the post in this location and I made a mistake? That's actually not where it goes. So that's one of the things that prevented me from moving forward. The other thing was I was worried that it wouldn't be level or plumb, right? In my mind, I think of the worst case scenario. You go to, you build this framing and you think it looks good, and then you go to put your decking on and come to find out it's not even square. You forgot to square it. And then the whole thing is like garbage because you didn't do a good job. So that right there, that was the second fear that I was having and why I wasn't moving forward. And I will tell you that one thing that I have tried to do, and this is why I think the deck has taken so long, is because I've really tried to spend as much time as possible making sure the area that I've been cleaning out and digging these trenches, that it's level, right? Like just spending extra time, just making sure that I'm checking twice. And also I'd done a little bit of research too, and I was finding that, you don't want your deck to be completely level. You want it to slope away from your building a little bit, right? Maybe 1/4 of an inch for every, I don't remember what the rule was. It was like for every foot or 6 feet. I have to look that up. I will find it and put it in the show notes. But you don't want your deck to be sitting completely level, because if it does, well, yeah, you've got some slats where the decking is, so the water will drip through, but you want that water to fall off of the deck. You don't want it to just sit there on the deck and puddle. And also what I found in my research is that over time, your deck boards, your decking can start to cup, which means now you've got this little divot in the middle of your board, so the water is just sitting there. And that was a fear too. What do I do to make sure that there's no, weird warping that happens to this? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like when you start a project and there's all those little things that you don't know, and you try to research it, but you're like, I kind of don't know. What if I don't do something that I'm supposed to do? And so that was a fear as well. What if it's not level and plumb? And what if over time it just starts to deteriorate because I didn't make sure that it was properly leveled and plumbed? So that was my second fear. And the third fear was I just didn't know what steps would be next. And I did tell you in the last podcast, that's one thing that I did try to do, is to map out like step 1, step 2, step 3. And thankfully, Tuff Block, that's the foundational system that I'm using, that's the solution for me having to dig posts. You don't have to dig a post. Now, I don't know what the specifications are for the Tuff blocks. You might not be able to go over a certain height. I think it just probably depends on your jurisdiction. Some of the jurisdictions may require concrete foundations for some supports, and then other supports you can do Tuff Blocks. I'm not sure, but I didn't really know what the first step would be, the second step, the third step. And even though I'm using Tuff Blocks and I went through their tutorial video, took good notes, there was still that, okay, I'm not really sure what I have to do. And I tried to make this step-by-step list, and it's been helpful, but I still get caught up on it, right? Like, am I really doing the right thing here? What's the next step? So those were the fears, and that's what prevented me from moving forward on this much sooner. And wouldn't you know it, I even found out about the Tuff Blocks because of a Facebook advertisement. Like, I know we complain about Facebook advertisements and YouTube ads and all of these ads, but you know, it's actually a really powerful thing when you think about it, because if they're able to tell you what you like and then put in this queue of ads that just serves up the things that you need. They know that you're into DIY. They know that you're into dresses. They know that you're into Legos, whatever it is. And then they serve you up the best stuff that you didn't even know about. It's actually kind of cool. So I remember scanning Facebook one day and seeing this Tuff Block, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is kind of the solution to what I'm looking for. So if it weren't for that Facebook ad, I probably would not have been using these Tuff Blocks because I didn't know about them. So in that case, I was actually pretty thankful to be a part of the algorithm that just knows who I am and knows what I like. You know, it's funny because when I had gone into Facebook one day, this was some time ago, I saw that it had all this information about who I am, what I like. And so I went in and erased all of those tags that had been tagged on my profile. And I changed my gender. I put that I was a male, and I put the wrong date of birth. And of course, for a while, it was showing me a lot of advertisements for men, you know, like men's underwear, men's clothing. And then, of course, it kind of figured out, I don't think this is a man. And if it is a man, maybe it just likes, you know, maybe they like wearing men's or women's clothing or something. I don't know. But now it has kind of figured out who I am. So now it's serving me up these beautiful dresses and jumpers. I've been clicking on them, so tempted to buy, but I don't want to be another quote unquote victim of Facebook algorithm marketing. Anyway, so that's how I even had discovered the Tuff Blocks. And I'm thankful that I did, because from what I've been experiencing over the last week or so, since I've really been working with these, is that it's a pretty tight system. I mean, it's a pretty secure system for building a deck. And, you know, for those of you who are listening, you know, you might be a little intimidated at the idea of building a deck, but I think the instructions that they have on their website, on their YouTube channel, they're pretty thorough. And if you've got a space in your yard where maybe you've just wanted to do like a ground level deck, just to elevate your lawn chairs, just maybe, I mean, of course you don't want to do like what do you call it? Like a fire pit or anything on top of those. But, you know, if you want to create some living space in your yard that's just up off the grass, and, you know, you didn't want to like take out the grass and do bricks or anything like that, you could do these Tuff Blocks. It's so simple. It's more simple for you to do on a flat surface than it is for me to do on a slightly sloped surface. That's where I was starting to feel a little doubtful that this was going to work, because there is a slope coming down off of my shed, and not just a slope, but there's also about a good, I would say 10 inches between the ground and the threshold of my door. So I knew that I was going to have to do 2 sets of posts in order to get this sloped properly, or to get it to build evenly with a little bit of slope so that the rain, you know, just dribbles off, but also just making sure that it's a sound deck. And I just didn't feel comfortable with that. So there's a couple of things that I have learned along the way, and I haven't gotten that far, but I just wanted to share them with you in case this is a project that you might want to do. You might want to do a low-level deck. You will have some of these same fears, especially if it's something you've never done before. But if you are doing just a floating deck, it's just literally not even a foot off, not a foot. It's close to the ground. You're not having to build up and do a lot of measurements, then this is an easy project for you. Super easy. But for me, it's a little bit more difficult because of that slope. But there's a couple lessons learned that I've learned along the way. And the first one I think is pretty standard amongst many different DIY projects. Expect multiple trips to Home Depot and Lowe's. I don't care how prepared you think you are for a project. You literally are going to make 3 or 4 trips to the store. And sometimes it's going to be like right after the other. For example, the other day, I realized that even though I had even though sometimes it's funny the words that come out of my mouth, even though I had bought the joist hangers in order to secure these 2x6s together, I didn't realize that I didn't buy the joist hangers that will go on the very end. If you've seen a joist hanger, it's that metal piece that goes and it goes onto the joist, right? So you're connecting the joist and you're connecting the rim joist. So the rim joist is the part that's like perpendicular. Well, I'll use my shed for example. The rim joist is going to be running parallel to my shed. And like the ledger is going to be, and that's not going to be attached to my shed. It's actually just a floating deck, but that's the one that's closest to my shed. Those are going to be attached to the joists, which are running perpendicular to my shed. And you have to tie it all together with the Simpson strong tie joist, not rim joist, the joist hangers. You have to have these because it just makes your deck compliant, right? Like if you were to have an inspection done, this is what you'd want to see. You'd want to see the joist hangers. And so I realized I didn't have joist hangers for the sides that are going to be the joists that are going to be on the outside of this deck. So I went to Home Depot, bought what I thought I was looking for, didn't realize that the sizes I bought were 2x8s and not 2x6s. So when I went to go install them, I'm like, wait a minute, I've got like an extra 2 inches over top of my 2x6. Like this is not the right size. So instead of even going back to Home Depot and see if they had it, I went to Lowe's. I don't know about you, but I feel like Lowe's is just so much more organized than Home Depot. It's cleaner. I mean, I don't want to speak badly about Home Depot. I love Home Depot. Home Depot funded part of this shed just because of some of the work that I had done with them. I had extra money that year and I put it into buying a shed. So I love Home Depot for working with them as a partner. And I do love going there. They typically have what I'm looking for. But sometimes it's hard to find what you're looking for on the shelf. In fact, I went to Home Depot to get these flush joist hangers. I needed 4 of them. And they had the 2x8s. Again, didn't realize it was 2x8. But the original box, it was another hanger in the box, right? And so a lot of times you'll find that when you go to Home Depot, it'll say, oh, this is the piece that's here on the box, that this is what you're getting. And you look inside and it's a completely different piece. But when you go to Lowe's, oh my gosh, I go into Lowe's, I go right to where I need. They have what I'm looking for. It's usually organized. It's clean. You don't have different sizes just thrown into any box. Grab what you need and get out. And that's what I did. I was like, whoa, they got the 2x6s. All right, let's go. And I bought them for like $15 total. And then I took the other ones back to Home Depot. So, and I also had needed additional screws, right? There's certain screws that you have to use. You can use hot dipped galvanized nails when you're installing the joist hangers, but you can also use screws. And I think I don't know the exact term, but it's Simpson Strong Tie actually makes these screws and you'll find them right there with the joist hangers. So just look for the size and it'll say on the box what size you need. Here's the thing. You're going to need 2 sizes because just imagine your 2x6s making like a T, right? Like the letter T. That joist hanger goes up underneath of that joist and then you're attaching it to both of the boards, right? So you're kind of going in at an angle. That's called toe nailing. So you're going to toe nail it in, but you're also going to secure it to the other joist. And I didn't have the right screws. I bought some screws, but I missed the fact that I needed a 1.5 and not just a 3. So again, that was another trip to the store. And I did buy that along with the joist hangers that I was looking for. But expect multiple trips. When you're doing a project you've never done before, it makes sense that you're going to miss some things. So don't get frustrated. Keep your receipts. Home Depot is really good about not needing a receipt, especially if you're using your same card that you scanned it, that you purchased it. They can look it up just by scanning that card. But if you don't have your receipt, maybe you paid cash, Home Depot is excellent with giving you refunds. I've taken things back to Home Depot that I didn't have receipts for that I had bought like last year. As long as it came from Home Depot, they'll take it back. And they may, when they scan it, they'll even tell you like, oh, this is too late. I think there's a way in their system, once they scan it, they know it's been a while since it was purchased. And they'll still give you store credit. So if you've got some old materials lying around that you just never used, maybe a couple cans of spray paint that you thought you were going to use, but you didn't, guess what? You can still take it back and get store credit. Take that and go buy some of the other materials that you need for some of your other projects. But expect multiple trips. That is totally normal. Even professionals do it multiple times. It's expected when you're doing projects. And also, if you're doing a project like this, building a small deck, like a floating deck like I am, definitely wear gloves and a mask. Remember, you're using pressure-treated wood for this. So you're not going to want to breathe that stuff in. And I think we tend to think, well, I'm outside. So I'm outside. I'm not in an enclosed area. That's fine. Well, it's really not fine, because if you've ever looked at the particles floating around you, even if you're outside, right? I mean, I imagine if it's a windy day, maybe that's a little different. But even with spray paint, when you spray paint, those particles are still floating around in the air around you. And just because you're outside doesn't mean it's going to just magically dissipate up into thin air. No, it's still floating around you. So try to get into the habit of wearing a mask when you're spraying spray paint, if you are cutting pressure-treated wood, if you're making a deck like this. And don't take for granted the fact that you're outside, you don't need to wear a mask. And wear gloves too, because you're touching that pressure-treated chemical that's on there. Another thing too is when you are cutting your pressure-treated wood, make sure that you use a wood sealer on the cut boards. This is something that I knew, and I did go and buy this. In fact, I'm looking at it over on my shed floor. It's called Cut and Treat. It's just a really thin, watery substance that will seal any places that you've cut on the pressure treated. Now, yeah, the pressure treated is pressure treated, right? Like it's pressure treated all the way through. But if you are cutting it, then you're compromising it. So you definitely want to add, 1 or 2 coats. It dries pretty quickly. It's very watery. There are videos I've seen where it looks black, like a tar almost, like a black paint. I couldn't find that one. Doesn't matter. As long as it's something that's specifically for pressure-treated wood, then you will want to use that. Now, we'll leave a link down below where you can find that. But here's one thing I'll say too. As you're cutting pressure-treated wood, definitely make sure that you do it outdoors. But also make sure that when you are cutting these pieces, use the pressure-treated sealer immediately. And the reason why I say that is because I thought, well, let me just cut all my boards at once, and then I'll come back and do the pressure-treated sealer. Okay, that's fine. You can batch it if you want that way, but I got so overzealous that I just wanted to get started. And I actually started putting the boards together, forgetting that I needed to add this sealer. So a couple of the boards didn't actually get the sealer. So I'm a little worried about them. Overall, I think it'll be okay, but it is that moment of like, Serena, you really should have just added the pressure-treated coating and then let it dry and then start building. So just keep that in mind. And the other lesson that I learned is really, the hardest part is prepping the earth. Whenever you're doing a deck or a small floating deck like I am, you really want to make sure that you've got even ground. And at least with these Tuff Blocks, they will tell you to build the trench or to dig the trench. They don't tell you how deep to go down, but they do tell you to make sure that it's level. And I think for me, that was probably the most anxiety provoking because I was so worried that I would dig down a little too far in one area or maybe not enough in the other area and then it would just be really uneven. But so far it's okay. I've got some of the deck framed. I just have to make sure that one side is lowered a little bit. So all the gravel that I'm putting underneath, right? So I did the paver base, or let me back up. I did the trench and then I did the paver, not the paver base. I did the weed block fabric, right? Because you don't want weeds growing underneath of your deck. That's just That's not what you want, because those weeds are going to grow through and it's going to look really messy. And then how are you going to be able to treat them? You can't. So do the weed block fabric after you do the trench. And then when I filled in with the paver base, then I tamped it down and used my level just to make sure that it's as level as I could get it. And again, I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that it's level. But then the next thing that you're going to be doing is adding the gravel. Now in the videos, they put road-based gravel. I couldn't find it anywhere. Couldn't find it at Home Depot or Lowe's. You have to go to a landscaping store to find it, but you don't have to use that kind. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, you can get all-purpose gravel. I personally thought it was a little too pebbly, which I didn't like. I really wanted it to be just a little bit more rough, like what I'd seen in the video. It seems like it would be better to hold it in place, but really it's just for drainage, right? If there's any rain, you want to make sure you've got proper drainage in that area. So prepping the earth was the hardest part. It was the most labor intensive. And I think once I get part of this leveled a little bit more, then I can start moving forward with a little bit more speed. But yeah, there's been some challenges that I've come across with this. I've never installed joist hangers before, and I had a heck of a time trying to figure out how to do this. I've watched videos on how to make a little jig to get the joist hangers on there properly, and it just gave me a lot of problems. So hopefully by the time the video comes out, I will have come up with an easy way to do this, or at the very least, you're going to see me struggling in the video to attach these joist hangers, but I have to do it, right? You have to make sure that your deck is secure. So that was the first challenge. And then the other challenge that I had was figuring out the layout. And I don't know if you've ever used SketchUp. I love this drafting program. It's the best. A lot of times when you look at woodworking on YouTube or you'll see blog posts, you'll see these people building and they're using SketchUp in order to build it on the computer first. And then what they'll do is they'll take their plans and then they'll just sort of explode them so that they can see, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need 4 of these boards, 10 of these. And it makes it really easy to build when you know exactly what you need up front. You've seen the model in front of your face. So I'm going to give you a tip that if you're not currently using LinkedIn Learning, you should be on LinkedIn Learning. Now, I don't know how much it costs per month, but I'm going to tell you, check with your local libraries, because here in Montgomery County, Maryland, if you're a resident of Montgomery County, Maryland, you can actually get LinkedIn Learning for free if you have a library card. And so your local library, wherever you live, doesn't have to be Maryland, may offer free LinkedIn Learning access. And there are so many trainings on LinkedIn Learning. I mean, there's trainings on even just how to do a job interview. I mean, so they're not all computer based. Sometimes it'll be like photography or video editing or how to use Excel, any of those programs. But there's just a lot of other trainings. And one of the trainings I'd always wanted to learn is SketchUp. So several years ago, I said, I'm going to learn SketchUp. And I don't have 5 hours to sit and watch the entire training, but I'll do 30 minutes at a time. And that training was enough to teach me what I needed to know in order to move forward to build my closet. Remember, I built a closet, 5x7 walk-in closet, and I'll leave a link down below for that if you want to check that out. But now I'm actually using it to draft out my deck. So, this has been a valuable program because now once I see it drafted on the computer, I know what it looks like in my mind and I know what it looks like on the computer. And so now I've got this template that I can use and say, oh, okay, I need 4 of these. I need 6 of these. This is how it's all going to come together. And it really helps to plan out how something's going to come together before you actually start doing it. You save time, you save materials because you're going to make less mistakes because you actually see it. And also in SketchUp, you can actually there's a little function in there where you can measure things out, right? So instead of you having to just write it down on a piece of paper, you can see the actual dimensions of what it is that you need to cut. And then you just put it all together according to your instructions. Now, it does take some planning to know, okay, well, how do you even put a deck together? That's where you got to do your research. I looked at the video for Tuff Block and I'm like, oh, that's how they did it. Okay, well then I'll model this in SketchUp And that's the plan I'll be working from. And sure enough, it's been working so far. But that was a challenge because I wasn't sure how to build this out, and seeing it on the computer has actually really helped me move forward. It gave me the confidence that it can turn out. And then also, one other challenge was I just really didn't know how much of a slope to leave for rain. I know that I did come across some things that had given some kind of estimates like, a quarter inch every, I don't know if it was like every 6 feet or whatever. So when I did mine, I made sure that it's not completely level, perpendicular as it's coming out from the shed. And so one challenge is making sure that that is consistent on each side. And I'm not sure if it is yet, but I feel pretty confident. And if not, I mean, come on, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This is my shed. If I've got some squeaks and little shaky parts, well, maybe that just adds to the character. I mean, who knows? And then the last thing that I kind of struggled with, which was a challenge, was do I use wood, pressure treated wood decking for the top, it's called 5-4 decking, which is actually 1 inch. So it's 1 inch thick. So do I use that decking, 1 inch by 5.5, or do I use something like a composite like Trex or Azek, I think is another popular one. And I actually did some research on Trex because somebody had used it. A friend of mine had used it to build a deck. He lives down in Florida, not Miami, somewhere southern Florida. And I was like, let me hit him up and see how his Trex deck is turning out after all these years. I think it's been maybe like a couple years since he built this deck. So I reached out to him recently and said, hey, how's that Trex that you're using for your deck? And he said, well, it was okay, but a couple of the pieces actually cracked. And I thought, oh my goodness. Okay, so all the reviews that I'm reading on HomeDepot.com, there are about 21 that I looked at the other day that said, oh my gosh, this stuff is horrible. It's not even on the, like it cups at the end. So you have to cut off the end part of the board just to get a nice flat deck, which means you're wasting all of this decking that you just paid for. There are people that are saying after, a certain amount of time, they're getting all these spots on their deck, and it's a nightmare to clean. They bought this composite deck because they thought it would be easier to maintain, right? Like that's their marketing ploy is, hey, this is easier to maintain than wood. If you buy wood decking, pressure treated, you have to stain it, and then you got to do that every few years. And people were like, yeah, I'm going to do composite. And then they find out, oh, well, wait a minute. It looks nice, but it might give me some problems. And I don't know which one is hotter, but I know this is something that had come up in the reviews on HomeDepot.com for the Trex. They said it's just hot. You can't even walk on this stuff when it's a hot day and you've got a dark colored Trex. No, you just can't. And I don't know if that's true for the pressure treated decking. I don't know. I don't anticipate I'm going to be walking into my shed barefoot, but knowing that it gets literally sun all day long, I felt like I wanted something that was not going to deteriorate in the sun. And I felt like Trex it just got too many negative reviews for me to feel comfortable moving in that direction. So I'm not using Trex. And I think the regular pressure treated decking will be totally fine. At least I'm hoping. The part I'll tell you that I'm really concerned about is, I don't know how I'm going to do the steps. Now, I did learn in carpentry school, like how to do the calculations for steps. I'm probably going to just need one step. I'll figure it out. I usually do. I'm confident that I'll figure it out. But right now it's about it's a foot, it's 12 inches to step into my deck, or from the bottom of the deck, or how am I saying this? From the ground to the deck to get into the shed, because the shed is 12 inches from the ground. And when you step out, the deck is going to be even with the shed, with the base of the shed, right? Can't think of the word, but yeah, it's going to be even. So I will need to install some sort of, and I think I've got a couple other Tuff Blocks, because you'll also want to make sure that that framing for the step is going to be also in the Tuff Block, right? You just want that whole thing to be stable. So that's what I have to look forward to. So I'm hoping, guys, I'm crossing my fingers by Friday. I know there are certain people listening to this who's like, Friday, forget Friday, Wednesday. Yes, I've been told Wednesday. So I'll aim, today's Monday. Yeah, I'll aim for Wednesday, but we'll see. It depends on the weather and depends on how focused I am. We'll see how that goes. All right, so I want to find out from you, what are you working on? Or do you have any projects that you're working on that maybe you have some of these same anxieties, these same fears, same lessons learned? This is the part that I love, is when you tackle a project that you've never tried before, the things that you learn from this. It's just, I love it. I love it so much. And I know how nerve-wracking it is because you just want this thing to turn out. But the lessons that you learn from starting a new project just makes you feel so much more confident in your skills. Because if it turns out, when it turns out, you feel pretty good. Like, wow, I did that myself. And I'm waiting for that moment this week. Believe me, I'm waiting for it. I can't wait. And, in terms of staining the deck, that's another thing I have to research too. I don't know. I just know that with pressure treated wood, you don't want to stain it right away. You want to wait, because if you stain it too soon, it's going to come off, right? Like the wood can still be wet. And it might be that I have to get a moisture meter to find out if the wood has reached the moisture level in order for me to stain this. And I will. I'll stain it. That'll be another video. That'll be a cool video. Oh, and one other thing I'm not sure about too is how I want to finish off the top. Like, I want this to look finished, and I don't want the corners to be raw. I want it to have a nice, almost like a picture frame top. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do that as well. And if there's some additional blocking that I need to put underneath, like in that framing, so that I'll be able to screw down maybe like these 45-degree mitered corners. I'm not sure yet, but I love this project. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And, 4x8, that's a pretty good size where I could even just put like some potted plants out there, something pretty, or maybe even a little chair or a stool or something. And it'll really, really start to feel like home. Now all I need is a bathroom. Whew, I guess I could always get one of those composting toilets, right? And put up like a little curtain on hooks and hide it right there back in the corner where nobody sees. Hilarious. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode in building a deck, and just some fears that I've had, some lessons learned, some challenges that I'm facing. And if anything, maybe you don't want to build a deck, but this might just be the motivation that you need to start a new project, because we all have those fears. Even if we've done a lot of DIY projects, we're going to come across projects we've never done before. And for me, I usually will be a little nervous about starting a project that I've never done before, but I also really like it too. It's a challenge. And so being able to figure out how to move it forward is part of the fun. Messing up is not fun, but if you've done your research enough, yeah, it slows you down, but it actually helps you to execute a lot cleaner. And that is what I'm looking for. So this isn't a sprint. This is more of just kind of a jog, like a nice leisure jog. And I like that. But I'm getting to the point where I have to sprint because we're leaving for Ghana very, very soon. I am going to West Africa with my family. And because I'm going to be out of the country, I got to get this deck done. There's no way I'm coming back and having an unfinished deck. Like, it's just not going to happen. All right. If you want to share your project with me, send me an email, serena@thriftdiving.com. You can find me on Instagram @thriftdiving. Send me a DM. I'd love to see what you're working on. And come back next week. I'm actually going to be interviewing a master gardener. So he's got some tips and things that you might want to know on how to combat some of these weeds in your yard. If you're doing some gardening, some tips that you might be able to use for your garden. It's not too late to get a garden started, is what he said. So come back. I'll have that for you on Friday. I'm a little late with getting this episode up, but I will come back on Friday and I'll have Steve Dubik. He's from the University of Maryland. and he's a master gardener. So we're going to talk to him, and you'll see that on Friday, or you'll hear that on Friday. All right, I'll see you next episode.
Diving, find it ugly, make it pretty. Paint the power tools, alright. Saving money with those thrift store vibes. Yeah, thrift diving. Find it ugly, make it pretty. Hey, hey. Paint power tools, alright. Saving money.